Welcome back to all the girlies, gays, and days out there. It is that time of the year where I am going to be allowed to be the meanest, most rancid version of myself, because I will be telling you what books I read in 2024 that were the worst books that I read all year. Before we even get started, I do want to say, just because I didn't like these books doesn't mean that I don't like you as a person. If you like any of these books that I mentioned here, I love that for you, but it personally did not work for me. Also, I will be roasting these books, so you might get a little bit butthurt if any of these books on the list are your favorite and I poke fun of them. But before we get into my list of the least favorite books I read in 2024, I do want to mention all the books that I DNF'd. I did read over 100 books in 2024 and I DNF'd 3 of them, which isn't a lot. I try really hard not to DNF books. So the first book that I DNF'd in 2024 was The North Wind by Alexander Warwick. This is supposed to be a Beauty and the Beast retelling, and I picked up this book mainly because I wanted to read another Beauty and the Beast retelling because I loved Entreat Me. That is a book that I read earlier this year, and I thought that this would have kind of the similar vibes. However, the blurb on the back of the book did mention that if you liked reading Jennifer L. Armentrout or Sarah J. Maas, that this book kind of aligns with those two authors, and I don't enjoy reading books by either of these authors, but I tried to keep an open mind when I went into this. But unfortunately, at like the 50% mark, I had to DNF this book. This book was giving he's abusing me, but I love him, and I just cannot get down with that. The more and more I read in this book, the least I care. Like, they started out as enemies and then they turned to lovers, and at one point I was like, I'm not enjoying this book at all. I don't like the love story. I don't like the fantasy world building. It felt very much like it copied from Game of Thrones but had a horrible fantasy element to it. And once I hit the 50% mark, I had to DNF because nothing that I was reading in this book was retaining any information up here in my noggin. And then the next book I DNF'd was Ministry of Time by Kayleen Bradley. This book's biggest sin was just being boring. I don't even remember the names of the characters in this book because it was that forgettable, and this book was so slow. So following our main character who works for the Ministry of Time, and she is in charge of like caretaking or handling is probably the better word. This guy who used to be like a sailor or in the Navy, and she brings him back to her time, just be like, you guys are all part of this important mission. But 60% of the way through this book, literally not a thing happened. They were just kind of meandering around the ministry, and then they for some reason started to like fall in love with each other. I could not handle how slow this book was, because when I tell you literally nothing happened in this book, I mean literally nothing happened in this book. I don't understand all the people out there that are saying how this is a great time travel book that was fascinating and it was exploring like a person being out of time, because I don't get it. I think I DNF'd this like the 60% mark because, as I said many times before, nothing was happening. So I just had to let this one go. I did have someone tell me what the ending of this book was, and it did sound as stupid as I thought it was going to be, so I put this one down. And then the next book I DNF'd was Bright Young Woman by Jessica Knoll. Honestly, if I had finished reading this book, it definitely would have ended up on the top of my worst books I read in 2024, because I had so many problems with this book. And Anna, if you are out there and you're watching this video, please comment below. Her and I disliked this book with an absolute passion. So Bright Young Woman is supposed to be an ethical retelling of the Ted Bundy murders, and I don't understand how you're going to be ethical about true crime, because the way that this book was written is that it was written to be intentionally vague about the true victims of the Ted Bundy murders, but also the author wrote about the victims in a way that I think that those victims wouldn't like. For example, one of the characters that she wrote about was described as being pockmarked in her face, having a lot of zits, and being so ugly, and I'm like, this real person probably wouldn't appreciate being written like this. The other thing that I found problematic with this book is that I don't believe, and somebody correct me if I'm wrong, that this book actually got permission from the true victims of the Ted Bundy murders to be written in this book. I feel like at the base minimum, if you're going to write a vaguely loose story on the Ted Bundy murders, you should probably get the victims' permission or interview them, and I believe the author did none of that. And the other thing that this book committed that was an absolute crime is that it was boring. I think I gave up on this book at the 60 or 70% mark because I had to re-listen to the audio of this book so many times to understand what was going on, because the second I would read something, it would fall out of my brain. You know how you would read a paragraph over and over again and then you just wonder, what did I just read? Because that was me the entirety as I was reading this book. The hate and vitriol that I have in my heart for Bright Young Woman truly knows no bounds. So those are all the books that I DNF'd. Now let's get into the books that I believe were truly the worst books that I read in 2024. And this is in ranked order. Some of the books that are on my list are truly some popular books and might be a bit controversial that I don't like them. We're coming hot with the first book, which is Pucking Around by Emily Rath. I am so sorry to all the TikTok girlies out there and all the hockey romance girlies out there that love this book, but this book just truly did not do it for me. This is a polyamory story following Rachel, who is a doctor for the Jacksonville Rays, who then gets into a romance with two hockey players and one guy who is like the equipment manager. I forget what his specific role is, but 80% of this book was just literally sex scenes. There is no plot to this book. And my main issue with this book, and sometimes that I found with male, female books, is that the guys really just want to fuck each other, but use the girl as a vehicle to like not be gay. So we have two characters in here, Caleb and Jake, who have been best friends since college for a very long time practically, and throughout this book they realize that they are in love with each other, but like they don't want to be gay about it. So there's Rachel that they get into a romance with, and then there's this other character whose name is Omari, who is a Finnish hockey player on the Jacksonville Rays, and those are the people that enter this unholy rectangle or square of a love romance. I honestly would have preferred just reading about Caleb and Jake if they had their own story without Rachel and Omari. Like, throw Rachel and Omari away. We didn't need them in this book. I would have been fine with just like a gay romance, but like I said, this book was trying to be polyamory, but what it really wanted to be is to just be gay. I will actually link down below all the videos where I read these books, because the amount of times that they have sex in this book is absolutely absurd. And there was this one scene where the logistics of how they're all putting things into each other's holes like literally didn't make any sense to me. And then coming in at number 9 is Catch the Sun by Jennifer Hartman. I feel so bad that I didn't like this book, because Jennifer Hartman is honestly one of my favorite authors, and she hadn't had a miss for me until I read Catch the Sun. So Catch the Sun is a YA dark romance, and right there, I found that a little bit problematic, because these kids are, yes, minors, but they are entering into this dark romance. So at the very beginning of the book, the girl, her brother had murdered someone, and this kind of like flips her life upside down. But she had also had a friendship as a child with the guy. I'm sorry, I do not remember their names. And because her brother had murdered somebody and went to jail for it, and he's like on death row, the family decides to leave town, but they move back into town years later, and then the girl reconnects with her childhood best friend. I'm so sorry, I do not remember the people's names in this book, but this was just like almost 400 pages of these two teenage characters making dumb decisions over and over and over again. And there was the reveal or a plot twist in this book that I found so stupid, absolutely stupid. And these two characters could not communicate to save their lives. I think it's because that they are teenagers, but it was just so irritating to me that they were just having a hard time with their romance, and the fact that this plot twist or this reveal was just so out of left field. I was like, what the fuck? I just feel like dark romance but with YA is not a vehicle that should be ever used. And I'm so sorry to Jennifer Hartman, because honestly, like I said, I've read like 3 of her books prior to this, and I love them, give them 4 or 5 stars, and unfortunately this was a 1-star read for me. And then coming in at number 7 is Diabolo. I don't remember the author's name, but this is a horror thriller book where this family takes a trip to Italy, and they stay at this one house or cottage that is haunted. And while they're in Italy, this book could be described as white people being the absolute worst, because every single member of this family was so awful. There was a sister in this book that had children, and she was giving I'm in a mom group. I have to double check every single thing that my kid reads, sees, listens to, because they must remain pure. That's what this mom was giving. But then our main protagonist, again, I don't remember her name, she just kept getting beat up on by her entire family, and I just wanted this entire family to just chill for a moment and just think about it. And our main protagonist does get inhabited by a spirit that then like follows her back to her life, I believe in New York. But the scariest thing about this book was just how awful all the white people are, and the book kept mentioning how the ghost had piss yellow hair, and that might honestly be the scariest thing about this book altogether, because I just found this book to be so unlikable. Every character was so unlikable, and I do not understand how some people are putting this on their favorites of 2024, because I just hated it so much. much. And now moving on to the 7th book on this list, which is The Dare by Elle Kennedy. I actually do remember the characters' names in this book because it made such an impression on me because I hate this book so much. So we are following Taylor, and she's described to us as being heavy, overweight, plus size girly. And then we're following Connor, who is a college hockey player. Taylor is in a sorority, but the entire book she wonders why she's in the sorority because she's not a sorority type girly. But anywho, one day her sorority sisters dare her to have sex with Connor, the most popular, good-looking hockey player on college campus. And because Taylor is not the kind of girly to back down from a dare, she goes up to Connor and she's like, "Hey Connor, my sorority sisters just dared me to sleep with you. Will you do this for me?" So they go upstairs and they pretend to have sex. It literally reads like the scene out of the Easy A where Emma Stone and that one guy like pretend to have sex.
Stop! Oh! Oh! Don't stop!
I'm not gonna stop!
But Connor, he catches the feels immediately because of course he does. And Taylor's like, why would he ever be attracted to me? I'm so ugly. I'm so heavy. I'm so overweight. But because Connor wants to continue to see Taylor, he and Taylor enter into this agreement where they will just fake date in order to make Taylor's sorority sisters jealous. And then throughout the book, as they fake date, Taylor's like, why would Connor ever be so interested in me? He doesn't like me like that. I'm so ugly. And Connor's like, no, you're beautiful. I think you're beautiful. And because Connor thinks that she is beautiful, she accepts herself because of course the love will fix her poor self-image instead of her just like going to therapy. The other thing that I disliked about this book is that there is not one, but there is two miscommunication tropes in this book. So the first one was where Connor he's like from the wrong side of the tracks and this one guy bribes him for money and he doesn't want to tell Taylor that he's in trouble, that he's like from the wrong side of the tracks, so he breaks up with her. And they were broken up for like a couple days or maybe it might have been a week, I don't remember, when Taylor's like, this man absolutely must talk to me. So she chases after him and he like reveals to her, okay, this is what happened, and she like forgives him for like ghosting her because he literally treats her the worst way possible when they break up. He's like, I want nothing to do with you, don't talk to me, blah blah blah. But immediately Taylor decides to forgive him. And then the second miscommunication trope that happens in this book is when one of Taylor's sorority sisters posts a very public video that was taken of her like making out with someone else, like, and she was practically naked. And Taylor's like, I'm so disgraced. Connor would never want anything to do with me after this. So she breaks up with him and she had like zero intentions of getting back together. In fact, during this mini breakup that they had, Connor tries to go ahead and sleep with another girl. Like they were literally broken up for like a day and he's like, time to go get my dick wet by somebody else. And the only reason that they got back together at the end of this book is because her sorority sisters decide to like make it right and tell Connor what happened. Otherwise, the sorority sisters didn't interfere. They would never have gotten together and we wouldn't have our happy ending in the book. This book is not good rep for plus size ladies. And in fact, if you struggle with like an ED or any kind of like body dysmorphia disorder, stay far away from this book because this book is just not it. And then the 6th book on my list is Varity by Colleen Hoover. This is the very first Colleen Hoover book that I have decided to read like ever, and when I tell you that this book is so bad, you actually need to believe me because our main character Lowen is so unlikable, as well as Verity herself. She is absolutely so unlikable. This is not a thriller book. This book is literally just Lowen, Verity, and the husband Jeremy being awful for like 300 pages. Verity tries to unalive her children multiple times throughout this book, and she is so obsessed with her husband, and I can't understand why because he's just a man. Jeremy is just a plain ass man. I know there's a lot of discussion online about letter versus manuscript for this book and who's telling the truth. Is it Verity? Whatever. I don't care because at the end of the book I was like, I don't like anybody. Everyone in this book is just so horrible. And spoiler alert, Verity is supposed to be comatose this entire book because she got into an accident which has then left her unable to like move, speak, and she's under like 24/7 care for her nurse. But guess what? This bitch is not actually comatose. She was just pretending the entire book. And the entire book, as she was pretending, she had to witness her husband, Jeremy, and Lowen fuck over and over again. Like, they are literally having sex in this house when she's upstairs and she's hearing it all. She's hearing everything that happens. This book is giving boy mom It's giving I'm obsessed with my husband. It's giving bad writing, okay? So this book is so bad, I do not recommend it for anybody. Who knows if I'll ever pick up a Colleen Hoover book again. I mean, never say never, but this is not a good impression right out the gate. And coming in at number 5 is The Wicked and the Willing by Leon Yu. I think that's how you pronounce the name. I'm so sorry if I'm getting that wrong. And this was sold to me as a sapphic story told in like 1920s, I believe, Singapore. But what this book really is one woman getting abused over and over and over again for over 300 pages. The main vampire in this book is named Varity, which I feel like is now cursed because Varity, the book by Colleen Hoover, is bad, and then this character Varity in The Wicked and Willing was actually awful. But she is the vampire who hires this one woman, I don't remember what her name is, to work for her, and the human that she hires is supposed to be like Verity's like blood bank, but they end up getting to a romance together. At first I thought this was gonna be like a sapphic cute vampire story, but it is not. The vampire Varity just abuses the girl over and over and over again, but she's like, Verity's in love with me, why would I ever leave Varity? And then there was another character thrown in there, I think her name is Polam, who is described to us as like a very masked woman who develops a relationship with the human bloodback. Her name's Pearl. Her name's Pearl. So it was kind of like it's not a love triangle. Like she was basically trying to decide between like Verity or between Polam. But this book had some very, very graphic SA and R-word scenes in the book that actually made me want to vomit. There was this scene where Verity sticks her entire hand up Pearl's privates and like rips it to shreds. But Verity also has the ability to heal, so whenever she would like injure Pearl in some kind of way, she's like, don't worry about it, I can fix it, I can heal it. So she was just being abused over and over again in the book. And then for some reason at the end of this book, this became a choose your own adventure book where the author asks us to choose between Verity, the actual abuser, or Polam, a person who has actually been kind to Pearl throughout the entire book. And I just don't know why that was a vehicle chosen. This book tried to be so many genres. It wanted to be gothic, it wanted to be paranormal, it wanted to be sapphic, it wanted to be horror, it wanted to be so many things, but didn't do any of them well. And number 4 on this list, and this is a book that offended me personally, is Hello Stranger by Catherine Center. Now, Catherine Center has been known to avoid writing spicy scenes in her book, which is fine. But what got me about Hello Stranger is that this book is supposed to be about a woman who has face blindness, but it's also supposed to be like a romantic comedy of sorts. And what offended me the most about this book is that it is not good rep for people who have neurological disorders. At the very beginning of the book, our main character, once again I do not remember her name, gets diagnosed with like not an aneurysm, but something in her brain that could rupture. A carcinoma, that is, no, a caternoma? I think it's a caternoma. But it's like this raspberry looking thing that's in her brain that can burst, which could lead to a brain hemorrhage, which could then lead to a lot of brain problems. And the way that Catherine Center does not handle this disability or this invisible disability well throughout this book was actually really offensive to me, because I have a brain AVM. If you don't know what that is, look it up. Maybe I'll put something on the screen here to describe what an AVM is. And the way that Catherine Center's like, she goes into surgery, she comes out, she goes home, perfectly fine. That is actually not how you treat a caternoma or a brain AVM. Like, it takes probably about 6 months before you can even get into surgery and do that safely. And how they sent this main character home, just being like, she's on her own, she lives alone, it's fine. Actually, no. When you have brain surgery, you actually need to be monitored by someone to make sure that you're not having seizures, you're not going to have a stroke, blah, blah, blah. It was just the way the medical disability in this book was handled was so awful. And the other thing is because our main character had the surgery to remove the caternoma, it gives her face blindness, so she's not able to recognize people that she encounters. Because she cannot recognize people's faces, it leads her to believe that there are these 4 different people, where at the end of the book, and spoilers, these 4 different people turns out to be one person. And it was so irritating and grating on me that I was like, lady, do you not recognize the voices? Like, please explain this to me. Maybe that could just be me being ignorant about what face blindness is. But the other thing that irritated me is that once she does fall in love with like the main guy, she falls in love with him after she kisses him once. She's like, I know that this is the man for me. Like, girl, you do not know that man like that. You've kissed one time. Like, we actually need to sit down, have a conversation, maybe have a little spicy spice scene, get to know each other more. But she's like, no, I'm in love with him. I'm actually in love with him. And I just could not get over just like the terrible writing, the insta love, how horrible medical diagnosis was just handled in this book. Actually, Catherine Hunter has ended up on my list of authors where I will never ever read from them ever again. And then the third book on this list is Sick Bucks by Tilly Cole. Now, Tilly Cole has made a name for herself for being very controversial, and I foolishly did not know that. But Sick Bucks is a book about these two kids where, as they were children, they are friends, but they were separated by circumstance. The girl has gone through some significant SA as a child, and then the boy turns out to be kind of a psychopath and like a serial killer and very messed up in the head, but they reunite as adults. And for some reason, this book decides to use Alice in Wonderland as a way for them to identify each other and to like go throughout the world. I think the girl, she wants to be known as Alice and she calls the boy Rabbit, but this book is so messed up. It's a dark romance book, but it should have been more like trauma porn. I don't think that this book needs to exist out there. In fact, this is a book that you cannot even get on Amazon because it is so vile. It is so disgusting. It is not a book that anyone should be reading. It's just the overuse of SA. So many sex scenes. Being in the head of these two characters that were so messed up actually made me want to vomit. And now we are down to the last two books on my list. And honestly, these last two books, I debated for a while which one was going to be number 2 and which one could be number 1, but I had to make a decision. And I was just like flip-flopping back and forth. But I finally decided that this is the way that it's going to land. And honestly, these last two books could probably offend some people, and I'm so sorry. But coming in at number 2 is Heartless by Elsie Sivler. I am so sorry if you like this book, but I actually really don't like this book. This, I think, is the third book in the Chestnut Spring series where we are following Cade Eaton and Willa Grant. So Cade is the oldest brother of the Eaton clan. He's like close to 40, and he has a child. I think his name is Luke, and his wife left him, but he needs a nanny for the summer. So he hires Willa, and at first he's very unsure about Willa because she seems to be kind of like a free spirit type of girl. When I tell you that I dislike this book with a passion, I need you to believe that because this book had such a huge focus on children, and I'm so sorry, but I'm actually a kid hater. I do not like children. I don't want even a single ounce of children in my book. I quite frankly don't even like children in real life. So to have a huge focus on the kid aspect on here, I was like, no. The other thing I didn't like about this book is that when Cade and Willa would have sex, it would be so graphically written that I was like, ugh. Actually, ew. There was this one scene at a children's birthday party. All the kids are outside, like having fun, and these two of them decide to go inside into the kitchen and they fuck each other. But I'm like, the kids are literally outside and all the parents are outside. You could get caught at any second, and it was just so unromantic. And the other thing I didn't like about this book, and also once again spoiler, is that it had my least favorite trope at the end of this book, which is surprise pregnancy. I hate a baby trope. I absolutely hate it. And when it happened in this book, it literally sent me over the edge. I know this is a lot of people's like favorite books, but put a child in my book and I'm like, literally will not care. I do not care for the child at all. And then the number 1 book, the book that has triumphed over them all, the book that I hated the absolute most out of all the books that I read in 2024 is Happy Place by Emily Henry. The hate and vitriol that sits in my heart for this book truly knows no bounds. We are following Harriet, and I think the guy's name is Wynn, and they have been a couple for a very long time. They've known each other since college, and this book starts out with like a friend's vacation because the cottage that the friends usually goes to visit are being sold by one of their parents. But Harriet and Wynn have actually broken up, but they don't want to tell their friends that because they're afraid that they're going to ruin their friend's vacation. And so they pretend to be a couple. And when I tell you, I am so frustrated by Harriet and Wynn. This book is not for the blunt girlies. This book is not for the girlies that say what's on their mind, because Harriet and Wynn could not communicate their feelings for each other, that it was just so frustrating to me. And when you find out that they broke up because they could not communicate how much they love each other, sent me over the fucking edge. And I also just don't like second chance romance, which is what this book was, because second chance indicates that there's something that's not working in the relationship, which is why you broke up in the first place. The other thing about this book that we learn, and also spoilers again, is that the friends actually knew that Wynn and Harriet had broken up, and they scheduled this whole friends vacation as a plot to get them back together. And honestly, that is not the friends' places to be interfering in their relationship like that. The friends were awful, actually, because if these were my friends and my friends were going through a breakup and, you know, friends that have been, you know, together and as a couple for a really long time, it is not my place to interfere in your relationship. Like, it just literally is not. And then the other thing that frustrated me about this book is that when he is not the type of person that is like wants to be like college educated, he doesn't care for that. He's more like a manual labor guy, and he starts to build some furniture, but he doesn't want to be seen as a failure to Harriet, so he just hides that from her. Even though they've been a couple for like over 10 years at this point, he just hides the fact that he's trying to start his own furniture business. And then also his dad dies, and he like couldn't communicate how depressed he was, even though Harriet was like, maybe you should like go to therapy for that. Like, Harriet was honestly genuinely trying to help him out with that. And then there was also a small cheating plot where Harriet, she's like a doctor, she like gets into a little like relationship with another doctor. It's just everything about this book I did not like. I do not like people who cannot communicate. Just say what's on your freaking minds. I'm the type of person that if something comes across my mind, like, of course I would say that out loud, but wouldn't I say that out loud? Like I said, this book is not for the blunt girlies. I went into this book generally thinking that I was gonna like it because I like so many of Emily Henry's books. In fact, one of the Emily Henry books that I read this year, it actually ended up on my best books that I read in 2024. But to have Emily Henry write this steaming pile of garbage, I'm just like, Emily Henry, with neutrality, why the fuck did you write this book? Like, please don't ever write anything in this vein again. I do not like second chance romance. I do not like people who cannot communicate. Just say what you mean. Anyways, my rant is now over. These are the top 10 books that I hated the worst in 2024. Like I mentioned at the very beginning of this video, if you liked any of these books on this list, then I love that for you, and it's just proof that reading is subjective and not everyone's gonna like the same thing. But I'm just telling you personally, I did not like any of these books, and I hope you enjoyed me ranting and yelling about these books because I'm literally worked myself up into a sweat now that I need to go like lie down. Stay tuned to my channel because my top 10 books that I read in 2024 video is gonna come out next week, so please subscribe and hit that notification bell. And if you like this video, please comment below, and I will see you in another video next week. Bye bye.